Hi, I'm Rich, this is Obi, and this is Triple Dog Workshop. People often ask me where Triple Dog Workshop came from, so I thought I'd introduce them. And in part 1 you met Bertie the Basset, and then in part 2 you met Rocket the Labrador. So to introduce the Triple Dogs, this is part 3 of a 3-part series where I'm making a longboard dedicated to each dog. In part 1 I made Bertie this awesome longboard using plywood and pallet wood. And in part 2 I made Rocket this very cool shaped longboard using hardwood scraps, plywood and a bit of epoxy. This is Obi-Wan, or Obi as he's more commonly called, and he's the third of the Triple Dogs. He's a Bracco Italiano, which is an Italian pointer. He's very highly strung, but incredibly handsome, and God does he know it.
I'm sexy and I know it. I'm sexy and I know it.
So as a recap then, I don't skate and never really have done, but longboards and skateboards are pretty cool, and there's lots of different designs out there which gives me lots of scope for this project. Now, having done 2 before for both Bertie and Rocket, there was no real design in mind, but I now need to find something completely different for Obi's in both construction and in shape. Now I think I've found it, but it's fair to say this project's going to have a little bit more pre-planning than the other 2. So first up, I need the wood from this pallet that my mate donated to me. Once it's in bits, I can then denail it. Now I have the lengths that I need, I can send them through the planer to get them all the same thickness and also square. Next up is to glue these pieces together. Now the glue's dried, it's a quick plane again to square them back up and then cut off some strips. Using some epoxy, I'm now going to sandwich some plywood between the pallet wood and clamp it all up and leave it to dry. Now the epoxy is dried, it's another quick plane up before I can lay the wood out into the orientation that I'm looking for. Further to this, I'm adding a couple of other bits of wood to enhance the final design a bit later. Now that I'm happy with the layout, I can add it to this form that I made off camera. Yeah, you've guessed it, I'm surrounding this wood with epoxy. So it's been 6 days and the epoxy is finally cured. So I'm going to break it out the mould, flatten it and cut it to size. Now that it's finally out of the form, let's make some snow. Like in parts 1 and 2, I found a suitable shape online for Obi's board, printed it off and cut out a template using some plywood. Using the template, I can now use a router to cut out the board to its final shape, making some more snow. So if you've seen parts 1 and 2, you've already seen that I put a shout out on Facebook for a CNC machine. So yet again, I'm back at Ollie's workshop to CNC the Triple Dog logo into Obi's board. And yes, like in part 2 with Rocket's board, I'm adding some epoxy to the logo. Of course, it's now time for some sanding. Lots of sanding. I started at 80 grit and took it all the way up to 220. Having brought myself back from the brink of boredom with all that sanding, it's now time to add some finish. So not to stain the white epoxy, I first have to mask up the board. After 3 or 4 coats, I gave the board another light sanding. Like Bertie's board in part 1, putting grip tape on this board would ruin its look, so I'm having another go at adding resin and sand. I left too much resin on Bertie's board and it puddled a bit. I also didn't use enough sand in my opinion. So on this attempt, I'm scraping off all the excess before adding the sand and being a bit more liberal with it. Finally, we're ready for some wheels. And I'm done. So there we have it, a longboard for Obi, the third of the triple dogs, and I have to say I'm really pleased with how this one's turned out too. Now, wood and resin is nothing new, but I actually love this design, and I especially like the fact that when you hold this up to the light, you can see the resin patterns all the way through it. I'm much happier with the resin and sand grip on the top of this board. It's come out much better than when I did it with Bertie's in part 1. So of course we've got the triple dog logo in here again. Big thanks to Ollie for sorting me out with the CNC services for all 3 of these projects, and I have to say, I'm looking around the shop to see where I can fit a CNC machine in here somewhere, because those things are the canine's undercarriage. I decided to go for some different smaller trucks on this board. Now, funny story, as I've said all along, I don't skate. But I decided to give the 2 boards that I've made for Bertie and Rocket in parts 1 and 2 to an 11-year-old that does. Now, he reliably informed me that the trucks on those boards were on the wrong way round, because those trucks are something called reverse kingpin trucks. Now, having turned them around, I have to say there's been a slight improvement in my skateboarding. But not much. But of course it is time for me to give this one a go, but I am starting to think I'm playing Russian roulette on the old injury front with the amount of experimental riding that I'm doing. But once more onto the breech, dear friends. So that's it, 3 and out. So what do you guys think? Is there some future longboard making potential here? Comment down below and let me know. If you haven't seen part 1 or 2, there's a link in the description. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it really does help out the channel. If you want to see some more stuff from Triple Dog Workshop, there's a playlist coming up right now, along with the bloopers. Thanks for watching. Right, what's next? But once more, but once more onto the beach. No, it's not a beach, it's breach. Because those trucks. But once more, where is it?